meeting. Shall we start the broadcast?
Just wait.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Oh, great. Right, I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Nottinghamshire Local Pension Board. This is the final board meeting under the current council administration before the council elections next month. Our advisor John Raisin is joining us remotely today, and is the only one who's joining us remotely. Start off with item 1 on the agenda, which is the minutes. I ask the committee if the minutes can be agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next item is apologies for absence.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Jalil from the city. No other apologies, and John is joining us remotely, John Raisin.
Okay. The next item is declarations of interest by members and officers. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? I think, well, I'll declare I've got an interest in item 6, and so has Mark Hempsall.
Yeah.
Hempsall. So
Yeah, if you're good with declare that it's materially affecting yourselves, the item 6. So if you leave the room for item 6, we'll capture that and we'll deal with that and fetch you back into the room once that's been dealt with.
Okay.
Promise.
That's okay. Oh, there goes our little walk by the riverside, isn't it? Right, the next item is item 4, which is the work of the technical and regulations team. The board will now receive a presentation on the work of the technical and regulations team. I invite Sarah Stevenson, Claire Thomas, and Paul Turner. Turney. Sorry, that would be Turney. Turney. All right. Okay. All right. To introduce the item.
Right. Just continuation of a theme here, I'm afraid. Trying to join the meeting in order to share my screen. Sorry.
And the action for the board is just to note the presentation. So
I'll do the covering report first. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
we all have. I'm struggling to get the screen. Sorry. We all have copies of it in the presentation. So,
yeah, and it's on page 13 to 26.
Yeah.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
So I'm already in if you want to wing it over and.
Right.
To kick off, or do you want me to?
If you,
Shall I kick off?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you would, please.
Okay. So this is actually the third presentation this morning from the Pensions Administration Service. So back in October, I brought a report about bringing to board a presentation at each meeting from the different teams that make up collectively the Pensions Administration Service. So back in October was the first presentation. That was from the Pension Systems team. They are the team that support, maintain and upgrade the Civica UPM system, which is the system that is used to administer pensions. The second presentation that came to board in January was from our Employer Support and Compliance team, and this is the team that support over 280 scheme employers who are members of the Nottinghamshire LGPS fund. And today's presentation is from our Technical and Regulations team. Board members no doubt are aware that the LGPS straddles a number of different regulations, so there's a degree of complexity. This is a small team headed up by Claire, and Paul works in the team. He's recently joined the team from within the administration side. and Jonathan Bridgman, who's on leave, is also a member of the team as well. But Claire and the rest of the team provide technical interpretation of regulations and deal with some of the more complex cases that we have. So I'm going to hand over to Claire to take you through the detail of what service this team provide, and obviously the recommendations. On the second page of the report are that the board notes the presentation of the work of the technical and regulations team. Thank you. Are we getting it?
Any second.
On my notes.
Okay, hello. So this is a presentation from the Technical Regulations team. As Sarah said, we're made up of 3 full-time equivalent members of staff. There's myself. So I head up the team as a senior practitioner, which is a role that I took on last year. But I have worked in pensions for 22 years, which is scary. I've spent most of that time on the pensions admin team, but I also worked for a time on the employer support and compliance team before then making the move into the technical team. And I then moved into this role after a very long-standing member of the pensions office retired, John Fairbanks, who some of you may know the name or even the person. He is greatly missed by all pensions office for his wealth of knowledge, and because he was a nice chap. Secondly, then we have Jonathan Bridgman, who is on leave today. He's celebrating a big birthday. So he's worked in pensions admin since 2016, and he's been a member of the technical team since 2022. Paul here. Paul Tunney makes up the 3rd member of the team, and he's the newest member of our team who started in January this year, but has been working in pensions since 2015. So as you can see, we've got quite a few years experience, which is invaluable to the work we do because we have to look at old regulations. Slide, please. So I'll give you a little bit of background to the LGPS, and you may know some of these facts already, but I thought I would just run through some of these points briefly so that it gives you a picture into our world. So the LGPS is over 100 years old and has been through many changes in that time to the regulations, with certain protections being in place for different members who straddle any changes. And we then have to be aware of what those protections are and what regulations apply to what period of service and how it affects the members. So we're one of 86 admin authorities in England and Wales, and we don't pretend to know everything. So the LGA, the Local Government Association, help us and all the other authorities by supporting us on the interpretations of the regulations. We meet regularly with other pension officers from across the East Midlands region to share some common practices, raise queries to LGA directly, and establish working relationships so that we can learn it from each other, such as in applying the McLeod and the pension dashboard regulations. So the East Midlands Pension Officer Group, or MPOG, feed then into the new National Pension Officers Group, which is NPOG. And that group replaces the old technical group that ran for a number of years. It's relatively new this year, and we have 2 representatives from MPOG who go to the National Pension Officers Group. Thank you. So that's our backdrop. But what do the technical and regulations team do? So we firstly provide technical and regulatory support and advice to senior management, pensions manager, pensions administration team, employer support and compliance team, the systems team, and pensions team members. And whilst it's not on there, we do also provide additional support to pension scheme employers, which generally would go to the employer support and compliance team, but occasionally those inquiries do come to us because we may need to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of the different regulations for particular scenarios. So we also take information that the LGA provide around new rules or legislation, and we then have to disseminate that to our pensions office and make some sense out of those regulations for people to work with. Right. So we regularly need to provide overviews to calculations that are performed in the Pensions Administration System, or UPM. This is to provide clarity to members of other teams, but it also ensures that the system is applying the correct regulations for specific scenarios. So how we do this is a number of ways. We test the system whenever new releases go in, and which have got changes to calculations. So we will look at the calculations that have been included, such as the application of the McLeod legislation. So we have to check the output of certain calculations, such as retirements or deferments, ill health retirements, and we test the output also for the annual benefit statements, which ensures that the system is calculating the different scenarios correctly for members who may have an old added years contract, or they may be in the 50-50 section of the scheme, amongst other things. Also, when the Government Actuaries Department updates or change factor tables, these are then uploaded into the system, and we need to check that they're being applied correctly in the right situations in UPM. So, as an example, in 2023, due to McLeod legislation alongside some other reasons, there were 4 new batches of factor tables that were released over the course of the whole year. They covered all of the different types of transfers, such as non-club transfers and club transfers, early and late retirement reductions or increases, annuities, and the less well-known factors, such as purchase of additional pension, known as APCs. If we have needed to raise any issue up to Civica, perhaps because of one of the situations I've just explained hasn't worked as we expected it to, when Civica then come back to us to say that it's been fixed, we have to retest and make sure that we're happy with the fix that's been implemented. So that's how we test the system. And what we also do quite one of our jobs is that we use the UPM system to extract documented data from individuals' records where they might have, we might have had a subject access request or a freedom of information request. These requests can be for many reasons. It could be a complaint or an inquiry into somebody's lost pension following a transfer a number of years ago. Or it could be a request from a claims company or the Financial Services Compensation Service.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? Can you explain what the difference is from a subject access request to a freedom of information request?
So there are different rules around when you need to provide the information, so the timeframes that you provide the information. The subject access request looks at the data that's held on the record. We've not had a great deal of freedom of information requests, if I'm honest. We have more subject access requests that come through. So we would pull off all the documentation from the records and provide that along with any notes that may be on the record or particular screens where certain data is held that we then provide to the person. So the freedom of information requests, we've not done as many of, to be honest.
I'll add a bit to that. So freedom of information requests generally come through to myself to handle, and they come from a range of sources. So subject access request is about an individual, so any one of us can raise a SAR request. So Joanne could raise a SAR request and ask for the documentation that we hold on the pension system with her. Clearly, we need to review what we're going to send to her, because again, there are rules and regulations. So if somebody, a third party, has commented, etc., we can redact certain information. Absolutely. And then we would provide that in a secure format so that redacting can't be lifted off. So freedom of information requests, so that legislation has been around for a number of years now, and it could come in a whole host of things. So it could come from a competitor, say, of Civica, asking what our contract length is, what our current contract costs are for the UPM system, how many users do we have, etc. Clearly, when we look at that, we look at the question that's being asked and we look at what the response will be. Clearly, some of those responses we would deem to be commercially sensitive. So we would not necessarily be sharing what the costs were with the system. However, obviously, a lot of that information is in the public domain. I think from an FOI perspective, we get fewer FOIs on the pension fund compared to what the county council gets across its range of services. So they both have very specific nuances to them. But again, we do ensure that we scrutinise what goes out to ensure that it's legally compliant, but also we are not exposing the fund to sharing information that we shouldn't be as well.
Thank you very much.
So following on from that, then, when we do receive complaints, which could lead to a subject access request, etc., we need to analyse it to that particular complaint to determine the correct course of action. It could be that in the first instance it needs to go back to the employer, or it could be that the scheme has a responsibility to respond. So where it is, we then investigate whether the regulations have been adhered to by individuals within the office, or by the system, or by the member themselves. And dependent upon where that complaint has come from, we can then provide responses. But it could go to members. It could go to pensions admin team, members of staff. It could go up to senior management, again, claims companies, the Financial Services Compensation Service, or the Pensions Ombudsman. So we also deal with the annual allowance and lump sum allowance calculation. So the annual allowance is a limit that's determined by HMRC on individual pension savings within a year. And one of our cyclical jobs is to calculate and provide information to pension members who may be affected by it. We also need to report to HMRC all of the members who have breached the limit in the year. The lump sum allowance is the replacement of the old lifetime allowance when the rules changed last April 2024, which means members now have a maximum amount of tax-free cash available to them, which is just over £268,000. They do have the option to take more, but they would have to pay tax at their marginal rate on any excess. So we would check and assess any members who have large pension pots when they are coming to retire against this new criteria to see if they're within the new HMRC limits. So far we've come close, but no one has actually exceeded.
But it's not what the press would tell you.
Of course, there are also protections that people have in place as well, so that could negate any additional tax. So, as mentioned earlier, then we are somewhat of a conduit between the Notts Pension Fund and the wider LGPS community. We attend the East Midlands Pension Officers Group, AMPOG. We also attend the admin subgroup, which is the Central Region. And these are fed into and equally feed back into the National Pension Officers Group, the Local Government Association and the Pensions Regulator. So we are also responsible for keeping the fund documentation up to date and relevant, which is the key word. So we maintain all the guides and forms such as the members brief guide, the application form, transfer forms, retirement packs, death grant nomination forms. Additionally, a large piece of work every year is to update or potentially redesign the annual benefit statements, which include guidance booklets that go out with the active statements, include FAQs for members. We also look at keeping up to date and relevant letters that are produced within UPM. So, for example, when somebody comes to retire, the letter that goes out to them to notify them of their benefits, refund options and transfer letters, amongst a variety of other letters. That's just an example. We also keep office notes and guidance up to date, and members of the administration team may need to go to those on a day-to-day basis to just make sure they understand or they're applying the right information, whether on a telephone call or when writing out to members. So as part of our communication responsibilities, we are also responsible for updating and maintaining the members section of the website. As you can see on the slides, hopefully I've got the wrong glasses on, but there's lots of information on there. That's just a little snapshot of what's on there. So on here you can see there is links to pages to show how benefits are calculated, employee contribution bands, information on the publication of the annual benefit statements, including the updated FAQs that would go out in the guidance booklet. We also put copies on the website. We also include the dates of dispatch so that members are aware. We link to external websites such as the National Member website and gov.uk as examples. And there's also a variety of forms in our resources section, forms and guides for members so that they can download and keep those bits of information. Additionally, we've adapted some of the forms into online versions, such as the death grant nomination form, which means that we have a one-stop shop for members. They can go online, they're using the website, they can complete the online form to nominate a beneficiary in the event of their death. So there's no need for them to print it out, fill it in and post it back to us. So that does conclude the presentations. If there's any questions?
I've got one. You talked about all the people you interact with, yet you haven't mentioned pools. Is there a reason for that?
Well, yeah, so Claire in her team will interact with the pool. So Talani and I were actually at the LGPS admin central meeting yesterday. So that would be more of a senior officer. Claire's really saying who she as her team interact with. Yeah. So we as senior officers would interact with the pool. Talani attends as chair of the board as well. So that's more at Claire's level.
Okay, so there's still interaction to the pools, because I was just thinking, where do they sit together? Because they seem a bit strange or distant from each other, that's all. Well,
yeah, these groups will attend the pool to provide presentations, etc. But yeah, and there was somebody from, I forget what it's called, MHCLG, or is it, how's it gone back? So there was Jeremy there yesterday, wasn't there, etc. Yeah, but Claire and her team wouldn't do that interaction.
So do all the other pools, where we've got 8 or 9 pools in the country or something, do they all work in the same backgrounds, or the people that belong to those pools, are we all of us work in the same standards, or is it, or does each regime work for itself?
We obviously all work to the LGPS regulations, how some of the other pools are constituted, their membership, etc. I don't know that every pool has an admin arm to it. I think that is quite unique for Central, but I don't know for definite. John may be able to add to that. I noticed he's got his hand up there.
No, I had a separate question.
Oh, okay.
John?
Yeah, you referred to claims companies. Can you just tell us a bit more about what their interest is?
Yeah, so we may have, there was a time when there was more, they seem to have tailed off now, but the people who had felt that they'd lost a pension, they may have transferred out of the Knox Pension Fund to another provider and subsequently may have lost that pension. And they would employ privately a claims company. And the claims company would come to us to ask us for details of that transfer so that we could show what steps we took to make sure that we safeguarded the member against scams and that sort of thing. They do a similar piece of work to the Financial Services Compensation Service. They just seem to be a step prior to it going to the FSCS. But they would request all the documentation regarding the transfer from us into the other scheme.
Has that died down now? Because I remember you're right. I mean, a few years ago, they seem to be getting interested in the LGPS. Have they got less interested, perhaps, because I dealt with one many years ago under the complaints procedure. The fact that you often find that, quite bluntly, it was done properly by the scheme, and therefore they've perhaps, given up a bit on it and found out the LGPS is not some sort of easy touch, inefficient organisation. At 86, of course, but
from anecdotally, I suppose, from MPOG, the East Midlands Pension Officer Group, we all noticed a rise, and it went in a bit of a wave. So we may have had quite a few, but other authorities weren't noticing that. Then when ours started to drop off, Derbyshire's may have picked up, or Leicestershire, or somewhere like that. So I think they did get quite heavy in volume for a time, but yes, they have tailed off now, but we do still get them occasionally.
thanks, Sarah.
I'd just add to that. Obviously, John, you'll be fully aware of this. Anybody wishing to transfer, there is now a very, there's a detailed process with a set of due diligence tasks that Claire and the team undertake. The claims companies, or I suppose anecdotally, they're called ambulance chasing companies as well. That would be sort of like the not so pleasant term. That there were significant companies were contacting people. What one company we seemed to have quite a lot of interest from was a company called Portofino, that for some reason seemed to be able to identify when members became age 55, and we're in contact with them. We have had, so we do obviously follow the transfer process. We've had a more interesting case more recently, a very sizable transfer, and given the value of that transfer out, I felt it was important that we actually got that signed off by Nigel Stevenson as the Section 151 officer, so that he was assured that all of the due diligence checks had been done, and actually we took some additional advice from the actuary as well. Often people are transferring out of the LGPS because they've been promised something bigger and better than the LGPS, so they're transferred into a SIP. as Claire rightly said, you know, people have lost out as a consequence, then they obviously come back through the IDRP process. But I think to date we have been able to demonstrate that we have followed correctly all of our due diligence, and therefore there's not been a claim back from the Ombudsman for us to reinstate somebody's pension. There was a case, I think it was Northumberland Police, John, where an individual transferred out. It was a sizable amount, 6 figures, to upper towards the million sort of level, where the Ombudsman then directed that particular fund to reinstate that member's pension pot. So they paid it out and then they had to reinstate it. So that was a double whammy. So I think we are acutely aware of the due diligence that we need to take. We do include documentation leaflets with annual benefit statements. You know, as we've talked at this group before, scammers are becoming ever sophisticated and complex. They catch people off guard, etc., and then it rolls from there, doesn't it? So, you know, there are things that we can do as a fund. There are things that obviously the board and committee can support us, but actually individuals have a responsibility themselves to ensure what they are then making as a decision, that they have properly taken the advice. And anybody wishing to transfer out more than 30,000 from their pension has to have taken proper IFA advice, and we need to have a document that's been signed by an approved person.
Can I just ask, you know, currently in the press, there's all these people with all these various pension pots.
The adverts,
and they're there, and obviously there'll be scams as well. Are you getting a backlash of any of that, or people are moving? Because there's a lot of people, you know, 3 or 4 years in a job, then they go somewhere else, they take, or do or don't take their pension with them, and then they sort of discover later on, oh, I didn't take my pension. Have you got, does that create havoc or any real problems for us here?
So, and answer that. So, board will be aware of this Section 114 notice that was issued by the city. As a result of that, the pension regulator contacted us because they wanted an assurance that we were monitoring to see if there was any significant increase in transfers out from city employees, because clearly, you know, scammers, claims companies, etc., could look at that and piece that together and say those members may be feeling vulnerable, and therefore obviously we had a conversation with the city, and we do monitor that so that we are in a position that if we see increased activity, we have a mechanism to obviously report back on that. I think transfers come in fits and starts, Claire, don't they? We get a peak and then it dies down, doesn't it?
I couldn't tell you what those peaks and troughs are based on.
No.
But yes, they do tend to. Sometimes we have an increase in the volume that comes in.
It is quite a detailed process, so people have to get a quote first. Then they have to, you know, like I say, if it meets a certain threshold, they have to have the proper IFA, you know, advice that has to be signed off. We, as a fund, have the discretion to say no, and funds where they're transferred out to, they are colour coded, red, green and amber.
There's amber and red flags that you can. An amber flag would mean that you could pause a transfer to get more information, perhaps get the member more engaged in the process. Sometimes they're not engaged in that process, so it's really important to keep them understanding what information is going out, what they're transferring out, what they're potentially giving out. So we can have quite a few dialogues with individual members about that. And red flags are where we stop a transfer because we believe there's something fundamental that it does not tick that box that says that we can pay that out.
You know, regarding that, then, if you get somebody that's a red, sorry. Sorry.
It's all right, Mark.
Pass that information on to anybody.
Back to the member.
No, not just a member. Will you pass it on to some like a fraud squad or anything?
No,
Well, if
just
there
explain a bit
was,
about where we go to get the
yeah,
red flag
so
info.
the
from.
red flag information, it's all provided by the pensions regulator. So that's our criteria that we match to. If we believe that there is something fundamental with the transfer, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a scam, but it meets one of the red flags, then we can stop that transfer and we notify the member. If we believe that there is a scam, then yes, we have to report that to the pensions regulator.
Thank you. Apologies.
No, it's all right. Okay.
My question is about the annual benefits and how do you change them each year and still make them recognisable as well as relevant so that straight away when that member gets it through the post, they recognise it as their genuine LGPS statement and don't just find that they've had a cloned one sort of thing and ring straight off of those numbers and just are aware fully what is coming from the LGPS, because it's fine having lots of things in place after a scam has started the process, but how do you stop it before it happens?
Well, we have branding, and it's in a particular format, the layout of the statement. We also have copies of those templates of the statements online, and people can go onto our website and see the copy of that, so they can literally look at the one they've received through the post and what's online, see that is a match. We also provide scam leaflet as provided by the pensions regulator within the package of the benefit statements, as well as the guidance booklet. So we provide quite a bit of information, and all of that information is duplicated on our website. But that's how we match for any members who may be unsure that what they've received through the post is correct.
I think an annual benefit statement is a snapshot in time for information only. If somebody, as a result of getting that, wants to then trigger a process, then they have to come in, obviously, either through an online form or directly to the office. And obviously there are systems protections as well. There's validation around identity, birth certificates, marriage certificates, etc. But recently what we've also looked at is engaging a tracing service as well. So looking at it the other way. So to do some mortality screening, to do liveness checks. We have quite a lot of overseas-based pensioners. At the moment, we have, I would say, quite a rudimentary proof of life form. We're talking to a commercial provider about liveness checks through a portal. ID and V, identity and verification systems, etc. Obviously, we have talked previously at board about ultimately moving members to an online portal, and that would do all sorts of checks. It would have multi-factor authentication, etc. But and obviously we'll come on later on and talk about cyber risk and cyber security as well. So there are things that we are looking at all the time. I'm not aware. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm not aware that any fund has had an ABS cloned, because actually it is only providing information. As I say, you have to come back into the fund to trigger processes to occur from there.
Yeah.
With all this pressure that's on going forward, have you got the resource, enough resource to deal with? Because it's more and more in the press, isn't it? Mm-hmm. People are moving more in small pots, and people doing 5 years here and 5 years there, and all this sort of thing, and then they'll be trying to catch up with their pensions. Have you got, with the resource you've got or with the systems you've got, are you set up to cope with that?
So I would respond in two ways to that. So the earlier thing I think you talked about, Councillor Adair, was the adverts that are currently out there. So that is Those adverts are running up to the launch of the pension dashboards that are going to come on stream. So that is a central government sort of initiative. Where people do have various pension pots with different companies, they lose contact, they don't remember, they move, they don't remember to update providers. So the National Dashboard Programme, as an LGPS, we have a requirement to connect to the dashboard by the end of October of this year. So we're on with doing that. That's an initial connection. As part of that, we need to continue our work on data validation, cleaning our data, improving our data, etc. There, as a consequence of those adverts, because my name is published currently as the main contact, I've been getting a lot of phone calls with people saying, I think I might have a pension pot with you. Obviously take the details, the team check it out, and invariably people have either had a refund for that pot or they have transferred it out. And in a few cases, yes, they do still have a pot with us, but they have never notified us of change of address. With regards to resource, I think it's a case that you can never have enough. But it's a way, and you'll know, Reg, that I've talked before, it's about the way we utilise our resource. So we've done a lot of work on automating processes so that we can get to a point where we release our experienced pensions officers to work on the more complex cases. You know that previously both John and I have talked about the recruitment issues that we've had, and our way of addressing that is we took 4 apprentices on in January 24. They're on an 18-month apprenticeship, which comes to an end in June. We are running that aligned with the council's apprenticeship programs. So that means if they successfully complete their apprenticeship, they are guaranteed a permanent job. Why would we want to invest in their training and then not keep them? And I have to say the 4 that we have are really outstanding. When we did the recruitment and the interviews, I think if we could have done, I'd have appointed about 27 of them. Clearly that was never going to be manageable and we needed to dip our toe in first. But certainly I've had discussions with Sarah Marshall, who manages the actual admin team, and we will be looking to go out to recruit at least another 4. I think our how we sort of like developed our people, and both Claire and Paul are really good examples of this. They come at the entry level of the structure, they then develop, they apply for internal promotions. You know, Claire talked about earlier, she's worked on the admin team, employer support and compliance team, and now Claire heads up the technical and regs team. So for me, it's about how we grow our own and how we invest in them so that they stay with us to be promoted through our structures. But yes, at some point we'll do a full-scale review of the structure, because the way we do business is changing. We're using the system. We want to automate. We want members to self-serve as well. So we're going to have to look at the creation of a data team, because data is absolutely key to everything that we do. You know, if either the member doesn't give us good data or the scheme employer doesn't give us good data, what we then produce out of the system being based on that obviously isn't good, because we've got to have accurate data. So, you know, we're constantly looking at how we improve our data. I think the tracing service will help us as well, but also, you know, we need members to tell us when they move, and you know, when they marry, when they divorce, etc., etc.
So can I bring Mark?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation. It's regarding the digital technology. I know we're all going towards that one, but we're dealing with old people's at different levels of education. So is there still in place, and will there still be in place a paper backup for people that need that?
We have in our office, we have access to all the forms that can be printed and posted. Yeah, and we use the central mail through the council to post out all the information that we need. So we have a depository of all the forms and documents. That they can be printed and sent out.
Yeah, and it will continue, obviously, and of course digital technology is taking over, but not everybody's comfortable with it.
I think in addition to that, Mark, what we're seeing with funds is that actually they are driving members to self-serve. They are driving digital interaction because it's cheaper. It also speeds up the process. So, for example, PPF, the Pension Protection Fund, they do provide different service levels if somebody is interacting with a paper form versus a digital form, as a mechanism to encourage that drive. So it has its place, absolutely. But again, I think if you drive more people to digital, then the other thing we can start to open up is capacity within the team to potentially offer some form of like an appointment system, surgery, that type of thing. So absolutely, we will absolutely have to put our focus into digital development.
Yeah. Well, I explained this to them when people come to me because they talk about being user friendly, etc. But because there's a small minority that still, I don't want them to drop back. You're talking about people like me with little phones like that.
But Reg, you have direct access to me, don't you? So yeah.
So that's what I'm speaking out for them members that don't have that knowledge, or they haven't got the facilities to use that sort of equipment. Thank you.
Okay. Can I bring John?
I've not got a question, mine's a bit of a feedback really. As an employer, I use this website. I just want to say it's actually really helpful, and it's useful, it's very user friendly in my opinion, and it's great we have people on shifts that are scared of technology and scared of going in it, and because they're on shifts, they're not always office people are not there when they start. So I direct them here, and it really helps. So
great, thank you. That is great. I was involved in the original development.
Oh, it's really good. It's user friendly and it's great. Yeah.
So that's
just wanted to be aware of
that. Any other questions? No. I just want to thank you very much for your presentation, and let you know that you're free to go.
Thanks, Paul.
We're just happy to note the presentation for
Thank you. The next item is the local pension board LGPS update, which will be done by John online. There's I think we've all got a paper copy. Just making sure that we've all got one. No, we gave it out. And really, we'll now consider the reports. And John, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, thanks, Chair. You'll recall that at the last board, I only spoke about one issue in this update, which was the consultation fit for the future. That consultation closed on the 16th of January, and well, as of this morning when this meeting started, the government appears not to have responded yet. As you will recall, that consultation proposed a major shift in terms of investment responsibility, taking almost all investment responsibility away from funds and giving it to pools. However, it wasn't a simple transfer of power that was proposed, because the government were clear in that consultation that they wanted to take a closer oversight, monitoring and scrutinisation of pools going forward. And they also specifically encouraged a reduction in the number of pools from the present 8, and they said that in paragraph 46, which I quote there. Also, at paragraph 57, they were very clear that all of the pools needed to demonstrate a clear path to meeting the requirements outlined in the consultation. And the requirements in the consultation were pretty heavy for pools. So this wasn't simply, we'll take it off the funds, we'll give it to the pools. This was, we'll take it off the funds, we'll give it to the pools, and the pools will have to prove to us that they can do what we envisage they will do. So there we are. Encourage you to reduce the number of pools. Tell us how you're going to behave in the future. Well, what's happened? Well, all 8 pools have gone back and said, we want to continue. And the 3 that weren't FCA regulated said, well, we'll become FCA regulated, fine. Now, I've some knowledge of what the 3 have done. And it is different. All 3 are different. But what I can say is that in different ways, they are all vigorously and actively seeking to continue. None of them are, passively trying to continue. They're all actively trying to. So that complicates things for the government. Notwithstanding that, we should remember, though, that the other 5 pools, the FCA regulated ones, still had to justify their existence going forward. And, no one quite knows yet what the government's view on that is either. So, as at this point, we haven't heard back from the government. Now, I think we will for a couple of points. Point 1 is, I think this government has shown generally it's pretty resolute in a lot of things. I think it's done things perhaps that people wouldn't have expected of this government so far. And I'll leave you to work out what they are, but they're big national issues, and I think there's perhaps been a few surprises there for people. So this government, I think, is pretty resolute. It's not hanging around. I think it's also learnt the lessons of the past, whereby things haven't been implemented when it was said they would be. And the other thing, of course, is that there is some legislation about to go through Parliament, a number of bills, including a pension service bill, including a devolution bill, which is an is a general local government bill. There is an issue that there's a real question, I think, as to whether you can make pooling compulsory under the present legislation. And I say that for a couple of reasons. The first one is that in 2019, the government stepped back when they proposed something, fairly radical, when a couple of, more than a couple of LGPS funds, a number of LGPS funds threatened a legal challenge, saying, you can't do that under the present law. No. So they know that if they do it under the present laws, they'll be challenged. So the alternative is to put it into an Act of Parliament. And that's also been hinted at as a recent opinion that the LGA got from Nigel Giffin, who's an LGPS expert, Nigel Giffin KC. So the chances are they probably will go for legislation. And if they're going to do that, something needs to be issued fairly soon. So I think we're going to hear something back fairly soon. But what I'm saying is the government hasn't had their lives made simple for them, because all 8 pools want to continue. And I've seen 2 of the 3 submissions, and it's not simple. So we'll see where we go. But I do think that the government will come back with something fairly soon, the first half of this year, but we'll have to see what it is. So that's that. I can't say any more about it, and I don't think anyone can. Everything else is speculation. There's lots of speculation out there, but I'm not going to go into that. The second point there is the LGPS accounts and audit. This is a long-standing issue, which and the chair and Mark will be well aware of, going back a long way. This goes back, certainly to August 2022. The Scheme Advisory Board has been saying, look, we need the accounts of the pension fund separated from the rest of the council's accounts, because both parts have to be signed off by the external auditor before you can get your audit certificate and finalise everything. And in many cases across the council, across the country, I'm not talking about Nottinghamshire here, I'm talking about the country generally, there is delays in the council's accounts. There's a lot of issues with external auditors, and it is, I think, more with external auditors than with councils. It really is. But the LGPS is suffering because of that. In Scotland and Wales, they've already separated it out, and they're getting everything signed off. So we go back to 2022, Scheme Advisory Board wrote to the government, said, look, can you just, separate us, please? And in February 2023, the then minister came back and said, yeah, I agree with this in principle. We're actively looking at it. So again, nothing happened. In March, the 2024, the then government did issue a consultation on the audit backlog. Scheme Advisory Board voted in again and said, no, can we have this separation? Well, unfortunately, by the time of the general election, nothing had happened. However, on the 16th of December, the present government issued a consultation called Local Audit Reform Strategy for Overhauling the Local Audit System in England. And they specifically said at paragraph 77, the government will consider decoupling the pension fund accounts from the main accounts. So the government's actually said, we're really seriously thinking about this, as the last government did. So that consultation is now closed and we are awaiting a response. Hopefully, at last, it will happen. Because I think, governments of both parties have wanted to do this. It's just a matter of doing it. It's complicated to physically do it. That's why the last government, didn't get round to it. This government has taken up, what the last government left off, and hopefully it will complete it. It would be really good because the fact is that, in England, only 12% of the statements of accounts of 23-24 were finished by the statutory deadline, but in Wales it was every single one, all 11. So that's the difference. Funding strategy statement. Funding strategy statement is a major document that is required under the regulations, and it's always revised at least during the actuarial valuation. Because it is an issue about how we are treating the liabilities at the approach of the fund towards employers. That guidance was last looked at in 2016 when the old Sit for Pensions panel issued their document, which lasted for the 16, the 19 and the 22 valuations. That's quite a long time ago, and an awful lot has happened since then. And so therefore the Scheme Advisory Board has been leading on this to actually revise the documents. And in January 2025, a new document, Guide to Preparing and Maintaining a Funding Strategy Statement, was issued. And that really does sort of update things. It looks at a number of major changes, actually. First of all, if you look at roles and responsibilities of key parties, back in 2016, we looked mainly at the administrative authority, the individual employer and the fund actuary. That's probably where we were at. Now there's a much bigger focus, particularly on employer guarantees and also on local pension board roles. Also, the issue of engagement with employers and other stakeholders. That has been a problem, I think, in some places in the past. Quite frankly, and I'm talking about the 86 across the board, some have engaged very well with scheme employers. Some funds, quite frankly, have done less than might have been desirable. And I think there's been confusion as well about what were we consulting on, what could employers influence and what couldn't they. So there is a lot more in this new document to clarify that. They are saying that there needs to be meaningful dialogue with employers. However, within that meaningful dialogue, we need to be clear from the start what the employers can influence and what they cannot influence. Funding deficits and surpluses. This wasn't in the 2016 guidance, and there's a very good reason, because the last valuation before 16 was 13, and at that point there was only one out of the 80, I think it was then about 88 funds, and that was Teesside, that was 101% funded. Everyone else was in deficit. Well, by the time we got to the last valuation, 61 of the 86 were 100% funded or more. And if we look at this valuation, the chances are that 61 will go up further. So we really need to talk about surpluses. And of course, because employers are under lots of pressure, there's lots of discussion, isn't there? And, some employers thinking, oh, perhaps we're going to get, a reduction in our employers' contribution rates, etc. Well, you need to be very careful at those sort of things. So again, that is another issue that has been covered. Also risk management. I think we've brought into greater focus here the issue of employer covenants, again, particularly for those employers that are not, statutory employers, where there are, risks. There may be less risk now because So, funds are very well off, but we know there's been issues in the past, and also climate risk, which the actuaries now have to look at. And it also covers a couple of new issues which have come in since 2016, i.e. the whole issue of exiting employers getting exit credits. Before the 2018 changes to the regs, an exiting employer couldn't get an exit credit. If they're in surplus, they didn't get a credit, it stayed with the fund. Now they can get a credit. And also you had this whole issue of deferred debt arrangements, where you can have a deferred debt when an employer finishes. So those have been taken into account. It's also very clear about the issue of climate change, and there's been some other guidance issued, which I refer to there, which you can see on the Scheme Advisory website. And if you look at the back of that document, that's the main FSS document. There's a very helpful checklist at Annex C, and there's also a helpful glossary at Annex D. Final issue is the SAB letter. Again, the chair and Mark will probably remember me talking some years ago about the letter that the then chair of the Sit for Pensions panel, Mike Ellsmore, issued some years ago about the resourcing of the LGPS. This letter actually is it's a new version of that, I think, in which Councillor Roger Phillips, who's the chair of the Scheme Advisory Board, was very clear about certain issues, and I think he's absolutely correct to be clear about this. For example, that the pension fund is separate from the general fund, absolutely clear. We all know that, but it needs to be restated. And of course, that any pressures on council services should not affect the approach taken to the pension fund. Now, if councils are reducing staffing levels by 10% in general fund because they've got a problem in general fund, they shouldn't be doing that in the pension fund because it's a completely separate fund. And also, of course, it is not the council's money. As you'll recall from the Supreme Court case in 2020, when the justices, were asked the question by the government, who said, "Oh, this is public money." They said, "No, it's not. It's actually the members' money." Now, it doesn't belong to the members in the sense that members can say what they want to do with it, but it's held on quasi-trust. So, any problems the council has financially, and they've all got them, shouldn't affect the pension fund. And he's been very clear about that. And the third issue he's been clear about is looking at pension fund delivery requirements, both resources and budgets, and making sure that they are in place. And of course, this has been backed up recently by the government, putting into Fit for the Future, the governance issues. I mean, in Fit for the Future, we all talk about the pools and local investment, but of course, right at the end, there's some very important issues there about governance and bringing in the Good Governance Project recommendations from 2 or 3 years ago. So that's what Roger Phillips's letter says. There's more to it. He points out the sort of things that can happen if you don't properly resource your pension fund. Problems with the pensions regulator, problems with the pensions ombudsman, problems with the external auditor, problems with not getting members' benefits right, etc. So that's a really important letter. I think it's very timely that it's been issued. So that's the issues in the LGPS update. Happy to take any questions.
Then there's no progress.
That's
I think there is some actually, Council. I think we will get fairly soon to the issue of separation. I think now that's clearly going to happen. I think it's just a matter of time. And I think there might be some progress actually on separating out, the approach of administering authorities to pension funds. I can't comment on all 86, but I'm getting a sense a bit of a sense that people are realising that, cuts to councils don't mean cuts to pension funds. They can't. That's a matter for each administrative authority what it does, but I think there is a trend, a clear trend to recognising that pensions are not part of the council in reality. And that's becoming clearer. So I think that there are some positives. And we will see changes in pooling. As I said right at the beginning, I think the government's life hasn't been made easy for it, just as the last government's life wasn't made easy either. But by the fact that, the LGPS have come across and said no, or that the pools, we don't want to merge. And certainly, I think there's been some robust responses being put in. I've seen a couple of them, and they are robust and they're strong and they're well argued. and government, won't and can't simply push aside. But I think we are making progress generally.
Mark?
Yeah, John, just to let you know, I went to a conference yesterday in London and Bell was there, the Minister for Pensions, and he didn't speak much about pooling, but he did speak a lot about investing in the country and using investment to get the country back on its feet. So the thing I did gather from it is where he's going to get this investment from, but he didn't speak a lot about pooling.
Well, the interesting thing about Mr. Bell, of course, is that Mr. Bell is not an MHCLG minister, and it's quite clear that the DWP stroke the Treasury are trying to influence the LGPS heavily. It's interesting he didn't say about that, but yes, they are. I mean, it's clear if you recall the last time, this government and the last government, because I think the civil servants are heavily influencing governments of all colours to say, look, there's a huge wad of money here, you can use it. Well, actually, it's not their money. It's not the government's money. Go back to the Supreme Court case. What did it say? Essentially, the payments into a pension fund are the reward for work done by the employees. They are not the government's money. They're not this government's money. They're not the last government's money. They're not any government's money. And there's this whole issue of fiduciary duty. Now, one of the things, and the biggest thing, and I'll go back to it time and time again, and I wish the government, actually got this, any government, or civil servants rather, if the funds do not make investment returns and they are in deficit, it has to be made up by the employers. And if the employers have to make it up, they'll have to cut other services to make it up, won't they? So actually, don't interfere, would be my suggestion. Leave pension funds to invest properly to make sure that you can, as the regulations say, maintain as stable as possible employer contribution rates. That's what they should be thinking about, all governments. But I think somehow, there seems to be this idea that somehow we can invest to get our way out of it. Well, actually, if there's good investment opportunities out there, LGPS will do it. I've no doubt about it. You look at the amount of local investment there's been across the three big northern funds, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Merseyside, all of whom have done some sterling work up there. But what have they done it in the context of? Making a proper return. They don't invest in things that don't work. And that's the issue. There'll be plenty of people out there who say, oh, here's a good idea, you can invest in locally. Well, a lot of it won't be, I'm afraid. Some of it will be. And where it is, that's great. But the LGPS is not here to, fund the country or grow the government's, GDP. Although they do want it, Mark, as you say. But that's my view. And, this issue of fiduciary duty keeps coming up and up and up again. And somehow people seem to be, trying to go around it. So there will be local investment, I'm sure. But it has to be within the context of, is it in the interest of the fund, ultimately?
Any other questions? Right, John, I've got an interesting one. It was something I picked up from yesterday's pool meeting. I think, is it Kensington or one of the London boroughs was going to set its employers' contribution to nil. Is that a possibility, or how do you see that?
No, I'm not, wanting to get into too much of an individual authority, but let me just suggest this, that I thought that the actuary, in consultation with the funds, etc., sets the employer contribution rates. I didn't know it was a fund. Did you know it was a fund, Chair? Because
no, well, I was surprised when it was brought up. I think it's something they're considering, or something that.
I mean, I don't want to comment on any individual authority, and I've heard all sorts of stuff about this. But if we go and look at what happens in the actuarial evaluation, the actuary sets the rates and adjustment certificate, which are the employer contribution rates. So the fund doesn't do it in isolation. I'd also suggest, and if you go back to the FSS guidance, there's something about conflicts of interest in there. On my paper, I forget which paragraph it is, But in here, yes, that's it, paragraph 57. Now, if you look at paragraph 57 of the new guidance, it talks about conflicts, and particularly conflicts between the administering authority as the administering authority, or as a council, and the administering authority as a pension fund. So hang on a minute, if an administering authority, and the one you refer to is an administering authority, and it's also, and it's also a council, is there a conflict there? I don't know, but I mean, I'd suggest that any council that's going announcing, before the valuations have even started, by the way, I know they're very highly funded, supposedly, but yeah, it's if I was a government minister or civil servant, I'd be questioning that one.
And I think you're right, because I think one of the somebody's slapping their wrist for even suggesting it or thinking it.
And in my opinion, rightly so, because it's a matter ultimately for the actuary in consultation with the fund. They should read the regulations, which they clearly haven't, in my view.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you very much, John, for your presentation. Just like I'd like to propose the following recommendation on page 28 of the pack, that the Pensions Board receives and considers the report of the advisor of the Pension Board, identify any actions required. Do you have a seconder? Thank you very much. Suppose we'll now move to the vote. Do I have votes for? Yes, no, thank you. All right. Has been carried. The next item is item 6, and for this item, Noel will take over the chair, as both me and Mark have a vested interest in the agenda item. So we'll just pop out and let the guy make a decision.
Don't walk too far.
Yes.
First time I've been choked out, right?
I know where you're going, so we're safe enough. Okay. Yeah, we're clear. Okay, we'll now look to item 6, and this is to do with extending the membership of Mark and Tulani's term of office for the local pensions board. The proposal is that the local pension board recommends to council, which meets next month, full council, the first new administration council, that the terms of office of Tulani Malifi and Mark Heppenstall be extended for a 4-year period. Happy to second.
I thought we did this by email already.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear for meeting purposes for the public that you're good with
Put it
this.
into Joe, didn't we?
So yeah, Joe, is there anything further you want to add?
This is obviously a requirement within the code of practice that no member can serve more than 4 years without that extension, which is why we've obviously canvassed you officially to make sure you're comfortable with it before bringing on paper today. We have also asked Tulani and Mark, who have confirmed that they're both willing to continue. So I'll just clarify that one as well, so it's clear we're not press ganging anyone. But hopefully, generally, the report speaks for itself, and I can see that there's a comment that he would like to add.
I mean, personally, I think this is an extremely good idea. I think, both Mark and Tulani have been the two members from the start who've been here consistently, have turned up consistently, have asked both of them lots, I think, over the years. And, Sarah's been at virtually every meeting like I have. They've asked, I think, I've never known either of them ask an inappropriate question or an aggressive question. They've asked some challenging questions, some thoughtful questions, and they've always participated fully. And, this has been for 10 years. Non-stop, and there have been stages in the board when, to be honest, there was it's been one or two cases, and they're virtually the only ones who've really contributed. We've been lucky, I think, that we've had some county councillors over the years who've been good, and that's been fortunate, because it has been difficult, and those two have been stalwarts of the board. I'd also add, this may or may not be relevant, as everyone knows, this is my last meeting. I'm stepping away after 10 years, and you'll get a new advisor and probably a better one than me, but that's a new dynamic. And I think, a new advisor, it will be easier, I think, for the board if the new advisor is working with, a chair who's been around for a long time and understands, rather than perhaps, someone who becomes chair who doesn't understand. Talani knows the history of this, and so does Mark Eppenstorn. Again, I think it will be better if for that reason, with the change of advisor, there'll be a different approach from mine, I'm sure, and it'll make it easier for continuity if we have the same chair. Certainly, that's what I'm thinking. Anyway, I think it'll be really positive. I think they both really deserve to be on, and hopefully we're getting a bit more stability now, and we don't want to break that stability.
Who's got the right to vote on this?
You.
Thank you. That's great. We've got the right to vote on it. Okay.
Golden
So you
rule.
got my vote.
Yeah.
Yes. Completely gets my vote.
Right. Okay. That's
it.
That's unanimous.
Yeah.
Very good. I'll go fetch the incumbent.
Yeah.
Very long time.
Yes. Yeah.
The chair the thing for it.
Yeah, it does. Yes.
You're both fired. Start again in the morning.
We've been biting each other's nails.
Do a Trump on you.
There's stuff on good
No such luck.
As you were.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much for extending our terms. And yeah. All right. Whew. Next one is item 7, which is the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Risk Register and Cyber Deep Dive. And this is just to update us and to help us identify risk that would be appropriate for a deep dive investigation for a future meeting. But before Sarah introduces the report, I'd like to propose the recommendation on page 40, which is in 2 parts, that the board notes the contents of the fund's risk register and deep dive, and the board identifies a topic for a deep dive at its next meeting when risk is considered. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much. I will now invite Sarah to introduce the report.
Thank you. So this is the open part of the report. There's also an exempt element. Board will be fully aware that obviously the pension fund has had a risk register for a considerable amount of time, where obviously we've identified and monitored risk. Following engagement with Zurich, we've done a full-scale review of the risk register, and working with Matt Hardwick from Zurich, we presented an updated format. We now also have moved the risk register from being a publicly available document into obviously being exempt. Clearly, having all of our risks out there in the public domain creates increased risk. In line with the fund's risk management strategy, obviously the board members will have opportunity to review the risk register at all meetings, and we'll be looking at that in the exempt part. But since board last saw the draft, there's been some non-trivial updates, which are detailed there in paragraph 5. This report also gives you a list of the ways that we obviously look to identify risk as well. But clearly, we are open to feedback from stakeholders, including yourselves, if you feel there's other risks that we may not have on the register. We've also included in the open report how we do assess the likelihood and the impact of the risk as well. I know Matt has said that is open, can be subjective. So we've scored risks ourselves through discussion in the exempt element of the report. You may want to challenge some of that. How did we come with that decision? And it may well be following your input that obviously we revise that as well. Going forward, the whole plan is that we select a risk to do a deep dive. We have picked up on cyber because we do believe that is a high profile risk. Clearly, it's often in the press. Clearly, the fund holds considerable amount of personal data. So by virtue of that, it's a high risk area. And also there's a particular focus on that in the regulator's code of practice. We worked with Aon and we did a scorecard. We baselined our score back in October 2023 that actually that particular report demonstrated areas that we were really good at, areas that perhaps we were weaker on, and then we have worked with Aon to produce a cyber strategy, hygiene guidelines, and we will be continuing to work on an incident response plan, as well as mapping the data and assets held by the fund. When we come to the exempt part of the meeting, we'll go into the deep dive. There was a presentation to committee back on the 13th of February, and you've got in your pack of information a copy of those slides. They are not public slides. They have been circulated as additional information. I've also had training on cyber as well from Aon, and we did have a working group on generally risk as well. And the plan is that we will have a deep dive on a risk selected by committee and also a risk selected by yourselves as board members. Obviously not the same risk, because this enables us having one selected by both committee and board, sort of like a double go at working through the risks as well. So yeah, risk is a high priority for the fund. So the recommendations are obviously board notes the contents of the fund's risk register and deep dive, which we will come to, and that we identify a topic for deep dive, that we will work on and present that back at the next meeting. That's the opening report.
Yeah. I mean, publicly, press-wise, company-wise, business-wise, bank-wise, all sorts of things, cyber seems to be the real problem with technology and data technology at the moment. So, and that seems to be affecting them. And I know even my son-in-law works in a large global business, and they just had a cyber attack. And he spent 2 weeks, morning, noon, and night, trying to sort it out. And it's a nightmare for any business, and it's a nightmare for the councils as well, because as you say, all the data, all the sort of stuff, and all the people. So for me, the prevention or trying to prevent a cyber attack, and they're getting more and more clever people, and they're not just in Russia now; they're elsewhere as well. Apparently, Chinese, according to the information I received, and other smaller nations are all out there trying to make a buck, and that's what they do it for. They make it to get a reward for whatever you're prepared to pay at the end of the day to get them to unleash themselves. So it's all about prevention, and it's not about cure. So how do we prevent it?
Probably we have that
I think
discussion in the closed part of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so what we'll also do is, I think we'll also, if it's all right, we'll do the next point 2, which is to identify a risk in that exempt part as well, so we can have a further conversation on that. All right, so in terms of the recommendation, I'll now move to a vote.
Well, so, I think if we can revisit the item in detail under the put this item and then come to a conclusion in terms of that. We'll capture a resolution for public consumption as well.
That's good.
I think that would be the correct approach rather than
Do it now.
doing it now.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Right, so the next item is the work programme. I formally move the work programme recommendation, which is on page 44 of the pack. Do members require any amendments to the work programme? Yeah.
So on the work programme for the meeting on 3rd of July is the work of the Pensions Administration team. So that's our annual performance update report. And that's, that's actually a presentation, isn't it? No, that's fine. Sorry. Yeah, misread that. No changes.
I'm just going to raise this, and I'm sorry if this is left field, but just in the wake of recent announcements across the Atlantic, and is there anything that, in terms of investments and stuff, that might be worth taking to a future meeting of the board, given the new world we're currently inhabiting?
Does investment go to committee?
I'm just putting it out there.
Possibly. I mean, are you specifically wanting perhaps someone from the investment side to address the tariffs and things like that and the effect on pension fund investment returns, or general kind of outlook for pension fund returns given the wider international economy and geopolitical events? I mean, it's one I could raise with Tamsin, and we could possibly put something together with the pension fund investments advisor.
Because at the moment, I mean, we had an announcement last night, and everybody's scanning around, see who it affects, how it affects, where it affects, what part of the globe it affects in, who, you know, all the rest of it. So no sensible answers can be actually put on the table today or tomorrow. It's going to take 2 or 3 months. Even the government hasn't got a sensible answer. Nobody's got, as to where the economics are going to be over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months.
Perhaps if we put a marker down in the work programme, that's something that we might want to visit at a future meeting, rather than try to timetable it for the next one.
But isn't the committees responsible for the strategy and for the investment programme? The pension committee, more than the board, if I understand it.
It is, yeah, because as part of our scrutinies, we also need to kind of pick up on any points to make recommendations to the committee.
Sarah,
for them to
correct me.
I think it is exactly as Talani said, it's for the board to scrutinise.
Scrutinise, yeah.
Yeah, so they
It's
can request,
it's up to the committee to
set the strategy. Yeah, but they can request reports from investments.
Yeah. Before going on to the exempt part of the meeting, I want to put on public record many thanks to Councillor Regidare, our board, and our board advisor John Raisin for their excellent contribution to the board's work over the years. And I'll say this as well, that I found their support invaluable in carrying out my role and wish them every success in the future. However, I also want to add, and I'll take them individually, that with Councillor Regidare, we were both on the fund committee, and I was delighted when you came onto the board, and also in recognition of your 24 years as a councillor.
the time, isn't it? Pensions. I first got involved with the pensions about 2007. And I chaired it for, well, how long did I chair it? For about 4 years.
Yeah.
Chaired it as well. So anyhow, it's been good fun. Hopefully you've got a pension fund that's in surplus.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I remember the first time they said, "Oh, we've got Mr. R. Adair." I thought, that's not Red Adair without fires.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And secondly, but not lastly, to John, thank you very much for your wise advice to myself and to the board, and really your insights, your friendship, and not enough superlatives to say, but really just it's going to be very sad not to have you around, and whoever takes over will make sure that they know they've got really big feet to fill. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, it has been a pleasure. Yourself, Mark, Councillor Adair, the other members have been supportive over the years. The officers have been really supportive. I mean, and it has been a limited number of officers for a long time. I mean, Sarah and John Clues while he was there, and Kieran, for a long time, I think were really the three officers who provided support for many years to the board. I think it's been a really good change to brought in, Joe as the governance officer now, because I think with John's departure, there was a real danger that, things were going to go down rather than up, and that hasn't happened.
In charge, John. No way, not with Sarah in charge.
Exactly, that's it.
Yeah. But what I mean is that in terms of the amount of effort that can be given to, because I know Sarah's got lots of other things that she does, even though she has always been resolute with the board. So it was a crucial moment, and the fact we've now got somebody who's actually more dedicated to this area than we had before, because again it was a bit of John's job, whereas this is a bigger part of Joe's job, is good. So I think actually, as I'm about to go, I think things are actually getting better than they were for an awful long time. And I think the work that Sarah's done on risk has been a really, actually, it's the sort of thing that the board really needs. And I think that is a really, really good thing, because risk can become such a ceremony, in all honesty, a sort of meaningless, empty ceremony in some places. And I think what Sarah's done is she's turned it upside down and turned it into something living and proper. So that's all good. And I think, you're at a point now where I think the board is, to my mind, progressing really positively. And I think it's got more speed up in the last sort of year or so than it's had in the previous 9. I really think you're and perhaps that's a good reason to change advisor as well. Perhaps you need, somebody else in with a different perspective. Perhaps I've said all I can in 10 years. So I hope you get somebody really good. I'm sure you will. There's plenty of people out there. I don't know who's applied, but hopefully, some of the better ones have applied, because there are some good people. And I just wish everyone well. It's been a pleasure, and I will miss you. And good luck for the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, it's difficult to follow that, but the next item is exclusion of the public. So I propose that, and we haven't really got the public, but I still need to say it, that they're... So,
Yeah,
We're still online then.
we as soon as you agree to go to private session, we will stop the broadcast.
Okay.
I propose that the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that discussions are likely to involve disclosure of exempt information described in Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. If agreed, are we agreed? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. That concludes the public business of the board. We'll now go into the closed session. Please end the live stream.